questions here, and I'd like to just, tell you about those. N. Kimkas asks, kindly clear how people can be introverts when they are in business or service where they have to interact with so many people.
So I think that's, that probably hits the core of the discussion, because many people feel that introverts are not very sociable people. I was on another conversation earlier this year and had a conversation before we went live with the host. And we had a good conversation about what everybody is, what we're both doing and that sort of thing. It was a pleasure. Then we go live and she introduces me and I'm going to talk about introversion. And she said, honestly, I don't believe you're an introvert, because we had a great conversation before this. And it made me chuckle. And then I got my thoughts together and I said, I think that's really the reason why I'm here, because I think that the truth is introverts can have conversations. We do have communication skills, but we have to do it our way. And so I would say to the person who asked the question, the challenge is just understanding our strengths, as we talked about today, and learning how to utilize that in the workplace and at home and in social situations in the community. And so more than likely, introverts are not going to feel comfortable in big environments, but we can break that down by having smaller discussions. So I would encourage you to grab a coffee with people that you work with on your team, your manager, other people in other companies, whoever you work with, and you might work with in a big project team, but break that down and have a coffee or a discussion with one or two at a time. And then you build that foundation of a relationship so it doesn't become overwhelming or intimidating, because you know about them. You've asked questions, they know about you, and it's more, we've broken the surface of that, and we can have the conversations in the workplace a lot easier.
I have a comment about that question. Does that person interact with so many people at one time, or with so many people individually or in small groups? Either way, to me, I'll emphasize what Steve said about focusing on the individual that they're working with. If they're making a proposal, or if they're bidding on a project, they're still working with individuals, and to focus on that person. You may not have an opportunity to form a relationship ahead of time, but still show an interest in that person and why they are coming to you. It's still a person-to-person relationship.
Yeah, that's true. There's another couple of questions here from Mubarak Ali. He asks, what does it mean to be an introvert? It seems there are a lot of misconceptions around the term itself. I think there's a lot that you've explained today. So maybe that question came in prior to whatever you said. But he also asks, what do introverts bring to the table?
So I think those are two great questions paired together, because the first one are the really negative stereotypes that do still exist today, not only in many perhaps extroverts, it's in dictionaries and thesauruses. You can check it after our discussion today, and you'll find some very negative words like loner, antisocial, narcissist, and icicle, wallflower, that today supposedly describe introverts. And I think they're vastly wrong. And so it's hard for introverts to swing around, to move from a culture where these phrases and words are applied to us. And when we learn that we are an introvert, we oftentimes adhere to those negative connotations early on, but then to swing around and realize that we actually have a lot of strengths to bring to the table to help provide more diversity to the conversations at work or otherwise. Some of the big strengths. So on my website, beyondintroversion.com, there's a strengths quiz that you can take. It's free. Over 1,400 people have taken it. And I think it's gotten a lot of attention because it helps to answer those questions. Or what are my strengths? The most common strengths of introverts, but everybody is different. But the most common strengths are things like preparation and listening. We talked about that earlier, listening and observation, thoughtfulness, kind of through a lens of smaller gatherings, Creativity. Many introverts are very creative, whether it's arts and writing or just creative in the business world. And so understanding what those strengths are and figuring out how to apply those. Don't hide those strengths, any of them at work, but apply them, because that your workplace actually needs that, and they need your authentic self there.
Thank you, Steve. There's a question from Lee Train. Lee, would you like to ask it, or would you want me to ask?
You're on mute.
You're mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sure can. Hi, LA.
Hi, Steve. I'm sure that you knew at a very early age that you were different from others that were extroverts. And as you mentioned before, you grew up, you went to work, and you had lots of stresses during your first 15 years or so in the workplace, and that you came home that you were exhausted.
I didn't know.
What do you think?
I don't take so long.
We got some static here. My question to you is, what do you think society can do to understand introverts and help them understand their strengths at an early age so that they can grow up and contribute in a positive way without having the stresses that you experienced for so many years?
Thanks for the question. That's a great question, because I think that while we talked about introversion or extroversion is kind of in our DNA, that there's a lot of ways that we can grow up with more confidence and embracing ourselves instead of feeling that it's a curse. And so I think whether it's parents or teachers or people in our church or synagogue or mosque, that I think that it's really important for people to support. So for the mother, instead of continually nudging their child to go out and play with kids all day and in the neighborhood and don't come back until it's dinner time, to say, you know, you can go out and play as you wish. And when you're ready to come back, you come back. And so oftentimes they would come back and they would want to read or do some other solo hobbies. And so for the parents to show an interest in, oh, what are you reading? Tell me more about that. So that the child can get a feeling that, yes, I'm different, and different is great. And people are showing interest in my differences, and that I can contribute in unique ways, as opposed to being kind of encouraged to go out and do things outside to the point where we would come home exhausted and feel that we weren't allowed to really be our true selves. Childhood and teenage years are frustrating anyway for most anybody, but I think that's the time for us to really learn about ourselves and embrace it. I grew up in a loving household, but I was the fourth of four kids, and my three older sisters were all extroverted kids that loved to go out and run around. And I think my parents just assumed that was normal, and that was what was expected. And although they never said it to me, I think they were very concerned about why I was so different. And I grew up having that feeling in the workplace years later, that I still felt like I was different. And I think that can change. And part of my purpose, I think, through my writing, is to try and help people to accelerate their own journey, not just the introverts, but to help the parents and the teachers to recognize introversion for what it is, as a great strength and opportunity.
And as an extrovert, I've learned from you, and I tried to learn earlier in my life unsuccessfully to stop talking and let the introverts speak up, and allow everyone to have their say. And I think that is a difficult challenge for an extrovert, because you just want to interact with people. I see a question about energy, how introverts gain their energy from your own mind, your planning, your solitude, whereas extroverts seek out other people for energy. And I find this absolutely to be true. I need people, and you, I know, need the time.
Yeah, I think that's the best definition that I've heard about introversion and extroversion is where we get our energy. I think the key and what really can make a big difference is, okay, we can recognize those things and we can say, well, at the end of the day, I'm going to go home and I'm going to grab some quiet time. I'm going to read a book, or I'm going to meditate or journal or whatever else. But what we really need to strive to do is figure out how can we insert some of those opportunities throughout the day, because otherwise we're completely exhausted by 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. But if we can, instead of having back-to-back meetings that are oftentimes high pressured meetings, if we can have a little bit of a break in between, go take a walk, go listen to some music, jot down a page in your journal, go do something that gives you a chance to take just a micro break. Then instead of your energy dissipating throughout the day, you'll have a little boost that will enable you to go home without feeling completely exhausted. And so I think that managing our energy throughout the day is really a key to feeling successful and rejuvenated by the time we walk in the door at home.
Thank you. Is there anybody who would like to unmute and ask a last question, please? Yes, Ritika.
I have one question from one of my friends, and she asked, why are introverts looked down upon in a social circle? Steve, would you like to answer this especially for them?
I would, and then maybe Rana would like to chime in a little bit. But my perspective is that we're usually not the ones that are maintaining the conversation, especially in a bigger circle. And sometimes we lack the confidence to participate in those sort of conversations. And so if we're not holding our own or asking questions, then people think that we're just not involved or engaged. Many times people would say, well, this person appears to be aloof. They're just not really interested. And that's usually very far from the truth, but we need to feel more comfortable, prepared and comfortable so that we can be curious in the conversations and we can participate. So the introvert needs to provide that preparation as we go into the conversations. I think the other people around the table also need to recognize not everybody is going to want to jump in and talk all the time. As somebody else alluded to around listening is learning. So people that are observing it, whether it's in a meeting or a social circle, they're learning and they're involved. They're just not talking all the time. We don't need to match everybody else's airtime with our own, but we do need to, so everybody needs to provide the space for people to listen and learn in their own way and talk when they want to talk and add to the conversation. So I think that will help to change some of the stereotypes of introverts in social situations.
An extrovert may not even notice that someone is not participating in a social situation or in a business situation. But an extrovert is typically, or many of us are sensitive to people. After all, we want to relate to people. We want to be liked by other people. So if you recognize as an extrovert that there's someone who's not participating, you can tell by body language if they've got something to say and just aren't saying it. You can draw them in and ask them, well, what would you like to say? And if you do that, then you've made a friend forever too. So, everybody wins.
That's a great
sharing
point.
that. I mean, like, I can see the introversion aspect plus extroversion aspect. Thank you. I have one more question, Steve. You said the preparation, if you're prepared enough. So when you're going to a social circle, what kind of preparation you're talking about for an introvert? What do they do? Like, how do they prepare themselves to go there? Because I'm sure they must be feeling nervous already that I have to go to social circle. What am I going to talk? And a lot of inner voices must be going on. So
Go ahead. Sorry.
what preparation would you like to talk? Like, would you like to give an example of that?
So my trick that I learned was what I call the list of 4. So before I go to an event, I think about 4 things. The questions I want to ask the people that are there. So we talked a little bit about that earlier. So rather than put the onus on myself to think on the fly, I want to think in advance. Who's going to be there? I don't need to have questions for everybody, but what questions would I like to have for certain people that I'm very curious about and would like to engage with? And if I don't know that person or haven't been with that person before, then, there's lots of information on social media or common people that we know. So just to learn more about them. So I think of those questions and I'll jot them down. Here's some questions I have for some of the people in the room. Then I'll think about what are some unique things about me that I would like to share. So when the spotlight turns around and shines on me, rather than being frozen, what would I like to share? Maybe it's a vacation I just took, or an event that happened with my family that I think would be an interesting conversation to talk about. So it's highlighting some of those things that once I have that spotlight, if I know the topic, I could probably talk for a long time on it because it's my topic, it's my passion, it's my experience. So just having that list or bullets of things that I would like to talk about can enable us to participate in the conversation. Third thing are just current events. So there's a lot of things on social media or on news where you can get something that comes to your phone that's water cooler chat for the day. So it's not necessarily politics or any of the contentious items, but it's just really bizarre or interesting things that are going on in the world that would be great conversation starters. So pick one or two of them out of that list and read the article and add it to your list, because that's something you could just, hey, did you hear that this happened? And most people wouldn't have heard about it, and it'll just be an interesting conversation to get going. And the fourth thing is, if you're in a business environment, to think about, some people call it their elevator speech, but I think it's more than just, hey, I'm Steve and I work at this company and this is my role, but share something a little bit more intimate. What drives you? What is the passion that you have in work? What's a project that you're working on that you're really excited about? Why did you come to that company or have that role? And so that vulnerability will invite other people to engage with you. And again, once you start going, that conversation will really start to deepen and develop. And so that list of 4 is really kind of icebreakers for the table, but certainly for ourselves to get into the flow. And once we get into the flow, then we don't need any script. We'll just keep going. Now, some people will write that list of 4 down and look through it before they go into an event. Honestly, I'll write it down on an index card, put it in my pocket. And if I feel like, I'm a little bit overwhelmed or I'm getting ready to go to a table that I don't really know, I might scoot over to the side or take a little restroom break, check on my cheat sheet, remember a few things that I wanted to do, and then I go right over in there and I dive in. And nobody knows the difference, but it builds it. I'm prepared and I'm much more comfortable to have the conversations.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful. I think I have learned new things now, which I can use. I'm not an introvert, but I can still use. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you so much, Steve and Ronarose. May I now invite our program director, Sri Krishnapani K.C. Raju, to do the vote of thanks. And I'm pretty sure you're going to hear something on Eastern philosophy and introversion.
Thank you so much, Binaji. I would like to make it a very formal vote of thanks, because I consider Steve and Ronarose both as part of our Rtambhara family, and you don't thank family members. So, but I would like to take this opportunity to, give us some of the takeaways from today's wonderful discussion, dialogue, which Steve and Ronarose had. Right at the beginning, Steve had mentioned about this continuum. So what I understand is that introverts and extroverts are not at the 2 extremes, but you find them all over the continuum, and it's more situational and contingent depending upon the circumstances or the situation one operates in. And what was very interesting right at the beginning, a very profound statement was made by Ronarose, that introverts, they gain energy from solitude. This was already discussed, and I think this from, as Binaji was mentioning, from an Eastern philosophical point of view, is it makes one independent. So one is independent and he's not dependent for his source of energy outside himself. So that's a very profound statement, and it needs to be contemplated upon. The second aspect is Steve had brought out very beautifully the strengths of introverts. You know, generally, as he mentioned, the very term introvert has a very negative connotation, and that mindset has to change. And in fact, we could put it the other way around, that the extroverts are parasites in some way because they depend on energy outside themselves. Whereas introverts actually generate the energy from their own self. And the three important points which he made in terms of the strengths is one, preparation, on which we have already had a discussion, which Ritika has brought up. The second is about the change and learning. That's another interesting aspect where you welcome the change and you're willing to learn and you're willing to listen. And I think some of the participants have already brought out this point of introverts being good listeners. And it has been found in the corporate sector also that there are several top executives who are very good listeners. And that makes a lot of difference in their decision-making ability. And I think Ronarose brought it out also by saying that one good thing which extroverts should learn is to allow people to have their say, so that they give them an opportunity to say whatever they want and then respond to it. And that's where the collaboration part of it comes, as against commanding or dominating the situation. So that's another thing. And the third aspect of the strengths of the introvert is to know and embrace who one is. This is a very profound philosophical statement. You know, the whole the field of philosophy is based upon knowing oneself and acting on the basis of one's own self-knowledge, and that dimension has been taken to the corporate sector or social or cultural or even corporate environment, where Steve mentioned about stretching it, not to the breaking point and not taking a leap, but stretching it and including the environment around you, and progressively, embracing and becoming, passionate about what one is and what one is good about doing. This applies, I think, across the board to everybody, because one needs to know what is one's passion and what is one good at doing it. And finally, the most profound statement, which has a spiritual dimension, is what Steve mentioned about bringing one's true self to the table. This matters in every situation, wherever you are, because after all, life is about human relationships. So in every relationship, if you bring your own true self to the table, I think that solves most of the problems, and that brings about that authenticity in oneself, which was the concluding remark of Steve. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank Steve and Ronarose profusely for this wonderful dialogue they had, which had given so much of meaning. And I think it has taken away the negative aspect of it, or the negative connotation of the term introvert. And I think this would definitely inspire most of the participants to read the book written by Steve and also by Ronarose. And on behalf of Rtambhara, I would like to thank all the participants once again for making this a great success. And this will be available on recording. And I think those who have really missed it out will have an opportunity to listen to this talk. And that finally, I would like to say only one thing. Again, coming back to what Ronarose mentioned about extroverts initiate the change. But I would like to conclude on behalf of Steve and say, while extroverts initiate the change, it is the introverts who imbibe the change and make it a part of their own life. And that's what really matters. Thank you so much, all of you, and for this wonderful evening we had here in India, and a very good morning to all of you in the US. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maniji. Thank you so much once again, Steve Friedman and Ronarose Train, for this wonderful conversation that we had today. I'd like to just inform everybody here that we have upcoming programs where we bring you interesting topics on holistic wellness and the arts, and delivered by a host of distinguished, knowledgeable speakers. Please join us on Saturday, 23rd October. We have Mrs. Annalena from Russia, who will be speaking to us on Mandala Dance, a lecture demonstration on energy alignment for body and soul. And on Friday, 29th October, this being the month of Diwali and Dasara in India, we have a special program for Diwali by Mrs. Sneha Devanandan called Kala Deepa. It's a Bharatnatyam performance dedicated to the beautiful festival of lights and dispelling of darkness. And the program details will be posted on our WhatsApp groups and all our social media platforms. And we'll keep you posted on that. Thank you all for your participation. And thank you once again, the wonderful speakers that we've had today. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.